a lot of these companies that, are part of the military industrial complex, if you will, I've had a lot of experience with Lockheed, with Raytheon, with these types of companies when it comes to field operations and kind of the stuff that I was doing in my arena as a special operator. I don't know about what they're doing and how they play in with this black budget stuff. And so I'd like to go through a couple of the companies and just have you just educate me and the audience about it.
Right.
Let's start with Lockheed Skunk Works.
Well, of course, the Skunk Works, dates back to the 50s and 60s. Kelly Johnson, whose, by the way, UFO encounter report we have, was given to us by Lieutenant Colonel Heckert, who knew him, who was our U-2 spy plane witness who encountered these objects as a U-2 pilot. But and then, of course, Ben Rich. Ben Rich was the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works and acknowledged towards the end of his period there that they had technologies that could, quote, take ET home. He also stated there were no private conversations anywhere on the Earth. True. No matter what your encryption is. And also he said that anything you imagine, we have already done at the Skunk Works. Now, there's the Skunk Works that would deal with a conventional jet, rocket, ramjet type classified aircraft, right? But then there's another division that is the deep black. I want to make a distinction between the black budget and highly classified, legally overseen projects. Here I'm talking about, there's a guy I'm working with now who literally oversees the black budget of the United States. He was never read in on the UFO or UAP issue. And when he tried to find out, he went out to the Lockheed Skunk Works, he was shown a bunch of these conventional propulsion systems. He was not shown the ones that are the man-made UFOs, that are the electrogravitics, the things that float, boom, 100,000 miles per hour. So I think that that's one of the problems, is that there's almost two parallel systems. And there's very little points of intersection between the two, what I call the constitutional government of the United States. I just call it USG, the U.S. government, legal. And then there's the illegal secret government projects, okay, the ISG. So there are compartmented operations at the Lockheed Skunk Works dealing very specifically with this area of technology, which has nothing to do with rockets, jets, conventional aerodynamics. And it has to deal with electrogravitics, which is the ability to create a very high voltage system that causes a electromagnetic field propulsion. So there's almost like an electromagnetic field bubble around an object. It can levitate, lift, and it can go, Mach 300 and never have a sonic boom and no heat on the outer section of it. These are very advanced technologies. Now, those began to be studied back long before I was born, and I turned 68 this week, so you can imagine how long we've had these things. We actually mastered gravity control in October 1954. One of the members of my team for many years was in the vault. He was the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs, the very large Department of Defense lab in D.C. there. And I'd been in there, and he saw the documentation for this. So, and I think what the public, and this is true of the senators and the congressmen and the White House, they are not read in to these other projects. They simply aren't. I had a friend of Trump's tell me over this past weekend that he said, they just don't tell us much or anything, or very little. So I think that these sort of operations, as Eisenhower warned, have just gotten out of constitutional legal oversight. So I call those the illegal secret government projects. But those are in the Lockheed Skunk Works. So there's facilities out in the desert. If you go out to the Mojave Desert, there's a facility and an underground opening. So the really sensitive facilities are all in underground skiffs or DUMBs, deep underground military base facilities. And that whole area of California is like a beehive connected underneath with tunnels. Okay. I know where they are. I know people who've worked in them. And I remember...
Are those all Lockheed?
No, because those are actually built by Bechtel Corporation or HIT construction. There are a few contractors who build these underground connectors. And for years, they used a nuclear-powered tunneling device that would go through bedrock and just glassify it. So you'd have a connecting tunnel between, say, Edwards Air Force Base and Nellis Range, and you never have to go above the surface. So I'm very familiar with these and where they're located, and I've debriefed a number of guys who've been on them. So it's all part of let's call it a coalition of operations that are corporate, contractor, and governmental, but governmental as in off the reservation of legal oversight and constitutional requirements. This is why the Senate and the House are moving quickly to get this under control, because about a year and a half ago, we were providing enough information that they now realize that this is real, that the UAPs, UFOs are real, and they're beginning to realize that a bunch of them are ours, but they're being used in deceptive indications and warnings, meaning false flag operations. So this, of course, is the topic that I brought up to the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Patrick Hughes, way back in the late 90s. I said, look, you guys are being completely zoomed and deceived by some of these objects you think might be extraterrestrial, but they're ours. So Lockheed has some of those.
Let's talk about
Raytheon has a very a certain type of them. Usually they're trapezoidal or triangular. My uncle worked for his whole career at Northrop Grumman. They have ones that are large, triangular, and other shapes. But so many of these objects that people think they see a UFO, well, it's a UFO to them because they don't know how to identify it. So one of the things we're doing is juxtaposing an interstellar vehicle, an extraterrestrial vehicle, with a man-made one, and what are the characteristics and differences? Because operationally and tactically, the Pentagon and the White House and Congress need to know this. Otherwise, they're sitting ducks to be deceived by all manner of nonsense.